What does 9/11 and the inception of Wikileaks have in common? They are both incisions which affect our way of thinking, incisions which can lead to snowballing consequences. The snowball effect is irreversible. What exactly are Wikileaks and its founder Julian Assange doing? This non-profit organization releases data on the internet, thus making it accessible to the whole of humanity free of charge. Wikileaks does not invent stories or spread lies and rumors. It puts the truth online. The truth is not liked by everyone. For example, the short film taken by a US helicopter crew which shows US soldiers slaying civilians in Baghdad, including 2 Reuters employees. The film is not popular with the US Army or its military partners because it shows us what they never wanted to publicize. It confirms that there is no such thing as a humanitarian war, just murder and manslaughter, disguised as humanitarian deployment. As ever, the powerful claim that the publishing of the data puts national security in jeopardy, not to mention that the data was stolen. The word stolen is not an accurate description when it comes to digital data, as the information that Wikileaks has published is not missing. The US government is still in possession of every recording that Wikileaks has ever released. The only difference is that now they have been put online and the whole world knows about it. Why does a country not want its citizens to find out what it is doing in their name? What is it exactly that is putting national security at risk? The citizens themselves, because they now know? Would a country be safer if its citizens were less informed about their representatives? Who decides what citizens should be informed about? Who owns the information which is collected through the use of tax money? Does it belong to the collector, i.e. the government agency, or those who finance the government agency, i.e. the citizens? These are complex questions. Is it morally reprehensible when an organization like Wikileaks publishes data offered to it by someone who has been officially branded a thief? If the answer is yes, why then is it okay for the German government to pay a Swiss thief 2.5 million euros to have access to a DVD containing the names of tax evaders? Is it because it makes good business sense? Unlike the German government, Wikileaks is not a receiver of stolen goods. Wikileaks does not pay and it does not receive payment for that which it publishes. It survives from donations. The driving force behind Wikileaks are idealists like those who once founded Greenpeace. Unlike Google, Wikileaks collects data in order to give it away for free, not for commercial advantage. What is so dangerous about Wikileaks that an international arrest warrant has been quickly issued via Interpol for the arrest of its founder, with the additional charge of rape? Is the allegation of rape 100% proven in the same way the existence of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction were? The truth is that citizens get all their information via mass media, and the mass media in the 21st century is anything but independent. Either a radio or TV station is privatized and therefore owned by one or more corporations like a defense or an oil company, or it is owned by the state, and what it broadcasts is controlled by the Broadcasting Commission, who decides what can be aired and what can't in case it hurts government officials. Nowadays, completely independent reporting can only be found on the internet. Wikileaks is a part of the internet. Its home is everywhere and nowhere. This form of existence is nothing new. Global players like banks, conglomerates and capital in general could never have become so powerful without being able to outmaneuver national states. The state has accepted this fact, but Wikileaks has been portrayed to us as a threat, a case of double standards. Why does the state react so uncomfortably when its citizens find out what their representatives really think and which games are really being played behind the guise of diplomacy? When someone finds out the content of what Wikileaks has revealed, they first of all start to distrust their representatives, then the official communiques from the entire state apparatus. They start to ask uncomfortable questions. When, thanks to the recently released secret US diplomatic memos, one finds out that the various Arabian states, along with the US, would like nothing better than to attack Iran, it won't be surprising for the average citizen when tomorrow the official news bulletins start to introduce the idea that Iran has weapons of mass destruction and that, in the name of freedom, there is no way to avoid attacking the country militarily. If the memos were not made public, the state would easily start molding the agenda to its purpose. And a few months later, we will be informed by the defense minister that Germany has lost a handful of its freedom soldiers, not in the Hindu Kush, but on the hills of Tehran, fighting to quell an aggressor. The mainstream news will present the world as an easy-to-understand place when the citizens are not aware of the truth. Wikileaks is making sure that we all know what most of us were already aware of. Politics and diplomacy are following one objective, and that objective is certainly not world peace. A superpower, regardless which one, does not like to share. It shares what is left over and deals out pain to those followers who do not obey. When Big Brother says, "Come on Germany, go to Afghanistan, there are terrorists there who are responsible for 9/11," then Germany toes the line. Germany is a good follower. Germany is a vassal, a US outpost who tries hard not to fall out with the US, not because the Americans are so friendly, but because the US still buys a considerable percentage of exports made in Germany, around 50% when it comes to automobiles. He who buys is right. He who sells keeps his mouth shut. Wikileaks is different. It is not in it for the money. It doesn't sell and it doesn't buy. Wikileaks has no traditional lobby. A lobby is a small group of people whose objective is to leave the majority without a voice. When one talks about Wikileaks supporters, one is talking about everyone, the citizens. We are the majority, and we won't accept our government's representatives continually treating us like fools. That we are being treated like fools was made clear to us after 9/11. If the US government's official explanation of 9/11 was that the World Trade Center was hit by 2 passenger airplanes, then subjected to a controlled demolition, we would have all nodded in agreement and said, yes, it looked like a professional building demolition. Both buildings sank into their footprints within seconds, followed by World Trade Center Building 7, which only had a few small fires burning inside. This is the work of professionals. The official version is, as we all know, very different, and we are not allowed to question it. This message has reached us loud and clear, and it has been respected for the last 10 years. Any respectable journalist who simply expresses the slightest doubt is seen as being offside. Furthermore, it is almost impossible for them to publish their doubts in a leading newspaper or mainstream media. The screams of indignation would be ruinous for their employer. 9/11 is like a red flag to a bill for all concerned, including your average citizen. Why? Because nobody wants to voluntarily break cover and become a target for anyone and everyone. The mass media is made for the masses. The individual is only on the safe side when he or she joins the masses and when he or she agrees with the general opinion of the masses. It is a fact that in 2010 one is not allowed to state that 9/11 was an inside job. One can't prove it. Not yet anyway. But one also can't rule out that there might have been, at the very least, support from the top, because that can't be proven either. 9/11 is a pending criminal case because there are too many unanswered questions. In legal jargon, one says in dubio pro reo, to the advantage of the defendant. And since 9/11, the defendant has been the whole of the Arabian and Islamic world. Our ability to repress all things 9/11 could almost be compared with our grandparents' repression of what happened in the Second World War. They allegedly never noticed how, at first, a few of their Jewish neighbors, and then suddenly all of them, had been rounded up, taken away, and never returned. After 1945, it was tersely stated that they did not know what was going on. This was a lie. The truth is that every German back then had more than a suspicion. But having more than a suspicion can become very dangerous, especially when you talk about it openly. When doubts are expressed, doubts exist. In the case of 9/11, this is true 100 times. Doubts are always repressed or quickly removed, in the same way the rubble was removed from ground zero. 9/11 was the initial spark for what we call today the war against terror, and what in plain language just means war. War and a slow erosion of citizens' rights. Since 9/11, there's been a concerted effort to bring the media into line, supported by all political partners, with unconditional solidarity. The credo is, you are either with us or against us, and those who question this doctrine belong to the opposition. Is that freedom of opinion? We all know that the so-called proof which led to the war in Iraq was invented by government representatives. We know these people by name. They are still free, and some of them are publishing their memoirs. We know that none of the alleged attackers on 9/11 were from Afghanistan, but still they try to make us believe that we must be in that country in order to build girls' schools, provide fresh water to its citizens, and hunt down terrorists. The Taliban, or ex-Mujahideen, who were supported by the US with weapons and know-how when the Russians were in Afghanistan, were called freedom fighters back then. We all know that it has to do with oil and secure pipelines. We know who the partners are in these regions. There is not one democratic state among them. But officially, it all has to do with democracy and freedom. Wikileaks confirms that our deep suspicions could turn out to be true. Wikileaks does not draw conclusions. It leaves it up to us to make our own conclusions on the basis of the data. The most recent disclosures prove that our government representatives cannot stand each other, and that our big brother does not believe in us or in the representatives of other nations. Is this information new? This wouldn't be so dangerous if Big Brother was not having to deal with massive economic problems in its own country. Barack Obama's administration is taking even harder action against unpleasant journalists than G.W. Bush did in his time. And Guantanamo, which is a punch in the face to everyone who believes in human rights, is still operating. Is that the change that they were once talking about? Freedom of opinion has become too dangerous for the US government, and the US government is not in the White House anymore. Since Vietnam, it has been holed up in the Pentagon. The question being asked there daily is, how can billions of barrels of American oil end up under Arabian sands? Wikileaks has revealed this kind of thinking, and by doing so, has made global trade transparent. It's crazy to think that, of all things, it's the internet which is enabling this kind of flow of information. The internet was originally invented by the US military in order to easily coordinate attacks in case of war. Wikileaks has beaten the inventor at its own game. Wikileaks' revelations are music to the ears of political journalists and any true Democrat. It scans a state like a state scans its citizens. We are being scanned not only at airports, but also with the help of new laws which since 9/11 allow citizens to be spied upon. The problem for those in power is that one can't control Wikileaks. One can also say that Wikileaks is definitely not embedded. Wikileaks is just the beginning. There will be many imitators down the road. So many that states will have to give up and stop making crooked deals behind the backs of their citizens. Imagine if tomorrow Wikileaks would publish the German federal government's secret memos to the atomic energy lobby, or its secret contracts with the pharmaceutical industry, or with Deutsche Bahn, or what the Interior Minister is really planning when he pushes to legalize online searches in cases where there is concrete suspicion, or what the new biometric passport is capable of. The ultimate meltdown would take place if Wikileaks would, for example, receive a copied hard drive from an insider containing everything on 9/11 we have not been told about. If we backtrack, we see that Wikileaks was the result of Glasnost. Glasnost led to the fall of the Berlin Wall, which in turn helped create a new Europe. This led to more freedom. But Glasnost also led to the fall of the Soviet Union. Is Julian Assange to the USA what Gorbachev was to the USSR? A man who ushered in the collapse of a superpower? What is certain is that a giant has been shaken, and the giant is now trying to defend itself by all possible means. Wikileaks has started the worldwide export of rebellion through knowledge. Populations are rebelling globally and defending themselves against what 20th century capitalism has left behind. An extreme imbalance between the rich and poor, made possible by the deliberate control of information. Wikileaks is opening our eyes, allowing us to look closer. It makes it easier for citizens around the world to stand up and say, I refuse to go along with this anymore. I don't want to be governed like this anymore. I don't want the 21st century to be a repeat of the 20th century, in which war, cold or hot, was the standard means to push through an agenda. Thank you, Wikileaks. If Julian Assange would be a Secret Service agent, he would be the head of a new super surveillance authority. But he's not. Julian Assange is one of us, an average citizen who is deliberately interpreting the right of freedom of opinion and freedom of information in favor of the citizen. This, my friends, is true democracy.